Welcome to another episode of College Admission TV. Dr. J.P. Novin talks with Brian J. Bruess, president of the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University, about how he is leading two long-standing partner institutions through bold transformation under a strong integration model.
Welcome to Season 3 of Higher Education Leader Podcasts. This season, we are exploring AI education and the future of workforce. The special thanks to our sponsor, directadmit.com, now allowing students to get instant admission approval from over 100 universities. You can also catch this interview on collegeadmission.tv in addition to Spotify and all your favorite podcast platforms. I'm your host, JP Novin. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Dr. Brian Bruess, president of College of St. Benedict and St. John's University. That's correct, two universities. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, JP. Thank you for having us.
Since stepping into this role in July 2022, President Bruess has been at the helm of bold transformation, guiding two long partner institutions into deeper alignment under their strong integration model. President Bruess, under your leadership, you have restructured around student learning, unified their governance and operation, and launched their first shared strategic plan. You have a very fascinating background of over 21 years tenure in various roles of presidency. We found your background especially interesting as you've been pushing forward for adaptation, nimbleness, opportunities in AI, and especially around experiential learning and institutional sustainability. I think our audience would love to hear from you. First, your background to the presidency, and you're one of the longest tenure serving presidents who's been in multiple jobs. And also, we'd love to hear about how you're managing two universities.
Well, JP, thank you for having me and inviting that question. I feel blessed to be. I tell folks it's a challenging time to be a college president right now, but that doesn't make it twice as challenging because you're the president of two places. But we're excited to be on this vocational journey. And at St. Ben, St. John's, my career in higher ed, I just started my 35th year. It's hard to say that out loud because it makes me seem a lot older than I really. But came out of graduate school after working in a mid-sized public university for 5 years in graduate school to a liberal arts college in the Twin Cities, St. Catherine University. I was a variety of roles there. The last few years, I was executive vice president, chief operating officer. And then I was there for 22 years and then went to St. Norbert College for my undergraduate, where I was the president for 5 years, and then landed at St. Ben, St. John's, really doing something that no other place in the country is doing, with two separate institutions, separately incorporated, separate bylaws. We have 44 people that serve simultaneously as members of two boards of trustees. And what we're doing is very countercultural in a sense, because we're working under this umbrella, as you mentioned, of strong integration, where we seek to identify and celebrate unapologetically those things that are distinctively St. Ben's or St. John's. Then at every other turn, we're really engaged in an enterprise-wide change process, trying to integrate this governance, the structure, and the programmatic experience to create a really intensely effective and robust student experience, but to do it in ways that are nimble and adaptive. So higher education is not known for being nimble and adaptive. So what we're doing is, I think, pretty exciting and intellectually, and just a really a tremendous change process, ecosystem-wide, with an emphasis on adaptive challenges and adaptive leadership. And that course lines up beautifully with our Catholic Benedictine liberal arts background, and thinking about connectedness, systemness, and how do we create seamlessness and adaptability in our planning for the future.
So your both institutions are deeply rooted in experiential learning, and it truly makes it unique. As such, I think you're the perfect president to answer this question. How do you perceive the impact of AI on the future workforce, specifically in the coming 5 years?
Well, I think that we have to recognize as two institutions are anchored in the liberal arts, Benedict and tradition, that AI is significant as it relates to workforce. But we're rooted in the liberal arts and Benedictine practices, which means we focus on the holistic development of students, mind, body, spirit, and community. Community living is a big piece of what we do. But we have a long history of believing in and offering high impact practices, including experiential learning, whether it's internships or research, community based engagement, where we're taking projects of problems out in the world. Our faculty and students are engaging. And of course, AI invites us to do it from a different point of view, but we're teaching students how to learn, how to navigate complexity, and how to integrate their values and how they lead with character in an AI shaped economy. So, there's lots of ways that we're doing this in terms of how we teach faculties, how we offer faculty development, how we think about the educational experience for students. But our belief is that the liberal arts is a perfect partner with AI because we're teaching students how to think, not what to think. And so we're asking them to be discerning, to bring an ethical framework, and to bring real application in experiential ways of problem solving of the world's wicked problems, but doing it with integrity and with purpose.
Could you just elaborate on how St. Ben and St. John, collaborate? Why two institutions, and how does the existence of the two create a stronger ecosystem?
Yeah, well, we believe that St. Ben's which is its heritage and tradition of a women's college, and St. John's is a men's university. We think that these two institutions have really distinctive ways of how they create empowered and principled leaders, offering an educational environment that attends to all of those needs. And so, in a time when the world is very disrupted, at a time when there's lots of challenges and threats to higher education, we believe that students that are educated in our tradition and our background through liberal arts and Benedictine tradition, these are graduates that are emphasize things such as of skills. Just lost you here for a second.
Yeah, I lost you. No worries.
Okay.
I could hear you now. We'll edit that out.
Okay. Can you?
I could hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I could hear you as well. Please continue. We'll edit that out.
Okay. I
No
can't
problem.
see you, but I'm going to go with hearing you. So we believe that our tradition of the Benedictine liberal arts background allows us to produce graduates that are principled, that they emphasize humility and the common good, the dignity of people. And so they're bringing a different kind of problem solving to the world's great problems. And we think this kind of an approach, and then doing it in a shared way, of course, allows us to be more efficient, more cost effective, and more focused on student learning. So when the more disrupted the environment, the more focused we need to be on our type of education, our approach to education.
Is when I did some research at your universities, you have a very interesting partnership with the industry. For example, the Mayo Clinic and some med tech companies out there, where your students are, have real life experience with medical technologies, biomedical devices. They really get their hands in the profession while in college. And obviously, both institutions offer a lot of majors and pathways to different professions. But in your opinion, what professions or industries are at risk in the coming 5 years due to the AI disruption?
I'm not, when I think of the interface between the emergence of AI and the kind of education we offer, we don't think that we need to per se reinvent ourselves for the AI economy. We believe that the liberal arts, which is at our core, already thrive in connecting philosophy with computer science and literature with data, ethics with economics. And so, in a sense, this is not a new pathway for us. It's really in our DNA. And the real magic happens in interdisciplinary learning when that classroom experience is stress tested in the world through internships and research projects. This helps us really sharpen our focus on building resilience and creativity and judgment for students. I think we could think about the different ways in which fields are being impacted by this. But we're trying to keep our focus on, the way in which we approach this is perfect for an AI world. And that our work is not about chasing the latest trend or new programs per se, but integrating AI into the enduring liberal arts strengths. And so our approach is that through the liberal arts, we prepare students how to think, not what to think. And this approach allows them to switch tools without losing their sense of purpose. And that experiential learning forces students to adapt in unpredictable contexts, just like the workforce tomorrow will do. So the goal is to have AI-infused liberal arts, not AI instead of liberal arts. So that's just kind of an approach that we take. There will be fields of study and maybe workforce opportunities that change. And so we're in some ways trying to prepare students for jobs and workforce needs that don't currently exist. And that's where we think we offer a real distinctive opportunity for students.
Now, of course, majors like nursing, biology, computer science, data science, those are easier to figure out in terms of experiential learning. But as you mentioned, you have a wonderful history in the liberal arts and humanities. I mean, everything from art history to theology to theater, English and what have you. So how do you make these folks AI literate and ready for these? Oops, and we lost you. As you look at the humanities major, right? One president told me yesterday that the artifacts of majors, such as the way we actually present English or philosophy and political science, may need to change as a result of AI in preparing the students. What's your thought about that?
Yeah, we view AI literacy as a part of digital and civic literacy. From an outcomes perspective, it's defining how we think about it as an outcome. So again, our task is to prepare students not just to ask, can I use AI, but should I? So I think another area to focus is around critical thinking. We want students to learn how to interrogate AI outputs for bias and accuracy and reliability. One of the exercises that was shared with me by some folks at St. Ben St. John's is a spot the difference assignment. And that is where students are focused on misinformation, disinformation, and they're sort of developed in partnership with librarians, faculty, and IT staff, where students use IA imaging editing tools to manipulate historical images, and then they challenge their peers to detect what changes were made and to uncover those differences, and then to talk about those differences. And using reverse image service techniques and to think critically about motives behind the alternative image. So we don't want graduates to blindly follow AI. We want them to say, hey, that's interesting, Chat GPT, but you're wrong. Or provide faculty with resources and professional development so they can embed this kind of literacy, technology, digital literacy in the curriculum, expanding traditional information literacy to include AI concepts and use. And even for staff, this is a community-wide effort. And of course, what makes it unique at St. Ben St. John's is that we're trying to thread through this our mission traditions of the Benedictine tradition, for example, the liberal arts. So I think that it's about how we integrate AI into the way we teach, our teaching pedagogy, our experiential learning, and much less about a whole new set of new programs. It's really how do we expand our understanding of digital literacy to include AI, and to teach students how to use it responsibly.
Now, this year, Governor Tim Walz appointed you as part of Workforce Development Board in Minnesota. So your role extends far beyond just the institutions that you run. It's a strategic outlook as far as workforce. And the question that always comes up is run rate. So when we look at his history of industrial revolutions and disruption, obviously we have the big industrial revolution, took 50 to 70 years, where we went from an agrarian society to industrial society. And now we've gone from industrial to a service-based society. We've gone through that transition, and then internet. As a result of that, we have some of the biggest companies in America today are because of internet, like Amazon and a bunch of more. So now we're transitioning into, I dare to say, first AI, which is a prelude to robotics. Then robotics is coming about. I mean, this is just the introduction to something even more mass. And Minnesota, like most of the country, you have about 60% of adults over the age of 25 not having a college degree. So when you think about how AI is coming and the speed of the disruption, how do you think through all of this as we look in the next 5 to 10 years? I know it's a lot of asked on a podcast, but given your role, I think our audience will be very interested in your take.
Yeah, it's a great question. First of all, we view ourselves at St. Ben St. John's in the way that I describe it is of, with, and for the community. Being very in tune with what our local community needs, our regional community, or the state. What are those needs? What is industry, a nonprofit, for-profit, across these various types of workforce areas? What are they saying about the current challenges that they're facing in their area? And then, as you point out, over the arc of time, these things have changed. We are evolving. But what I would argue is this, is that our contribution to this is really about what endures across time and what endures and permeates across functional areas. And that's our foundational history, a 2,000-year history of the Catholic intellectual and social tradition. The Benedictine tradition is almost 1,600 years old. And the liberal arts tradition, depending on how you count those years, that's hundreds and hundreds of years as well. And at the center of that is critical thinking, reflective judgment, principled, empowered, the common good, thinking about what the world needs beyond what the person needs. Doing that within the context and the dignity of people, and knowing that all work has dignity and purpose. And so our particular contribution to this conversation is about how we teach and how we engage across time. And so that's why for AI, we view our role as teaching students how to operate effectively and be contributors to society as it's evolving. So we're teaching them how to think, and those enduring skills of critical thinking, how to communicate and interact, digital proficiency, literacy is a key part of that, but coming to problems in the world, no matter what era it is, requires the consideration of what does this mean for humanity? What's the right thing to do? What's the principled thing to do? And so we believe that students can pursue the good life, which is a high-paying job, successful career, and serve the common good. And so it's a analogical imagination is what it is. And it's asking students to think both and to navigate this disruption. And as you point out, the velocity of change is speeding up. And so I think that puts a greater premium on this sort of nimbleness in thinking and creative thinking and thinking in groups and solving problems together, interdisciplinary approaches. So there's a lot of impact on this in terms of how we teach and how we bring AI and AI tools to bear on the learning experience.
As you know, in the past few years, especially after the Great Recession, the number of headwinds colleges and universities have experienced is unprecedented. We've never seen this in history. Like we've had blips after the decline of the baby boom generation into the workforce. We've had, various disruptions around MOOCs, but there's a steady headwind almost every 18 months. Something has hit higher education with the culmination of COVID, and then boom, AI coming right after it.
Mm.
So in our surveys of over 100 university presidents that we do every year, it's a qualitative and a quantitative survey research. One of the biggest concerns that we hear is the negative perception of a college degree. And so it is on the rise, and it's impacting different pockets of demographic more severely in some and less severely in others, but it is a persistent issue. So what do you say to parents today who have that negative perception, and then you add the AI layer on it? So if they want to send their daughter to St. Ben or their son to St. John, what do you tell them to ease their concern and that higher education still matters for their future?
Yeah, boy, that's a great question. A couple of things that come to mind. One is higher education has a lot to do to adapt to our and learn from our history and adapt to the change that you're describing. One of the big pivots that we need to make is redefining what merit means and redefining what a college education means. And part of that is moving away from being so dependent on the credential, because the credential can create sort of the haves and have-nots in the world. So one of the ways that we're focusing is, of course, what we do is 18 to 22-year-olds, four-year degrees, liberal arts type background. But what we're doing within that is focusing on outcomes, the kinds of things that really change the life experiences of people. Better health outcomes, better engagement in civic opportunities after graduation, higher earning potential, better health outcomes. And so I would say to families that are questioning the value of higher education, that the evidence is overwhelming, that there's a financial ROI that's significant. The evidence is overwhelming that the more education that you engage in, the healthier you are. The more engaged you are in society. And so we have to move away from the credential and the job as the delimiting factors that define the value of education. So whether it's a high school diploma, a GED, a two-year education, a public or private, four-year or independent higher education, whatever type of education, maybe it's certificate education, or maybe it's lifelong learning for continuing education for adults who are constantly retooling. We should encourage folks to be on that path in whatever way meets their life circumstances. We particularly focus on how education contributes to the health and the flourishing of the human experience. And so I think we have to expand how we define education, and education needs to adapt and meet the world where it is. And we do a particular type of education, but we do it in a larger context of higher education. And so I would say, look at the evidence, really study the real ROI of education, and know that we're trying to do something that takes us beyond the credential. And so we're educating women and men on how they think for their life. And we're equipping them with skills and abilities that endure regardless of the disruption that we see in employment or workforce sectors. And that's what I'd say. And we also need to you look at outcomes and look at the evidence and then choose your way into that. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for a lot of people that are currently not committed to lifelong learning.
One president told me we build people for life, not just for work.
Yeah. Yeah. The way I think about it is that it's a both and. We want to have a good life, a successful career, contribute, to have earnings, but we also want them to see their role in the world as much more than that, to be committed to the greater good and their communities and things that matter beyond themselves. That's a more vocational view, a communal view, and it's about human flourishing. It's less about me and my job and my salary than it is a much bigger impact. I think it's more joyful, and it's really profound for you and your families and your communities. We have all sorts of students that are here getting their degree and developing these skills, but they know that they're breaking poverty barriers. They know that they're doing this for their family. 25% of our students are first generation students, never had a family member go to college. So that's the kind of impact we're trying to have, and that we are having, is that it's, yes, the credential is important, but what's much more important than that is the lifelong impact that comes from the kind of education that we're trying to inspire and to provide.
In your discussions, there's a common theme of community. And precisely, education doesn't happen in silo. You're optimizing for the whole. And it's interesting. How do you indoctrinate? I guess indoctrination is not a popular word, but acculturate that within your student body, that it is your fellow alum and people you work with, and the ability to work in teams is what's going to be enduring for times to come. That is easier said than done.
Yeah. Well, we're blessed by a couple of things. First of all, in a very disruptive environment, organizations need to focus. As opposed to trying to be all things to everyone. They need to focus. And the way we're focusing is on our core values, Catholic, Benedict, and liberal arts, those three in particular, and residential community. So we believe that there's a real catalytic compounding interest power in doing work together. And so we think of it as community life, community learning, engaged pedagogy. It's very active. It draws people in, not individually. The old days of a lecture and people listening, that happens on occasion, but what you'll find on our campus is a much more dynamic, engaged, group-based approach. So we have a fundamental belief that there's power in collective action. There's power in community sharing and multiple perspectives. That kind of learning creates at St. Ben St. John's an affinity factor that's off the charts. People use the language of family and home and love to describe these places and the impact that they've had. So that kind of sharedness and sort of systemness of how we do the work creates a cohesion and a collective sense of unity and purpose that really is a powerful emotional and intellectual stimulant for the work itself, and then how people view themselves when they leave physically leave the campus. They never really do emotionally leave our campus. But that then places them in their place of work in their communities, thinking not just of their own path, but how their path intersects with those people that they're around.
As the job market shifts, and we're always used to shifts. I mean,
Yeah.
I think both you and I started in the liberal arts, and somehow we are discussing AI, or most of my life has been in technology. And so, as you're building your pedagogy and curriculums, how do you think this is going to the job market is is going to impact your core curriculum? Do you see majors or programs being adjusted significantly as a result of the shift?
Yeah, I see faculty, and our faculty are embracing this. First, there's a wide range of resistance to change, but I'm really proud of how the faculty and staff are coming to this. In other words, some folks want to just pretend like it doesn't exist, and others are wanting to experiment, and some are a little more cautious. But overall, there's this welcoming of the question of AI and looking at, again, how it is integrated in our current programs of study and our current general education requirement. And I'd say a big focus is on teaching approaches and pedagogy. And so I think our opportunity to engage with AI from a teaching perspective is really emphasizing more case-based learning, more reflective practices, journaling, discussion-based discussions of context, challenging students to articulate their values, explore their ethical boundaries. Faculty, of course, need to model ethical, moral responsibility in the use of AI and how they teach in their scholarship. And we have, there's an example that I wanted to share with you. We've got a computer science faculty member with a couple students that are, it's technical in a way that I don't totally understand, but it's kind of taking pre-existing virtual urban simulation model by implementing quantum enhanced reinforcement learning and algorithms. And their work focuses on enabling they call multi-agent coordination between autonomous vehicles and unarmed aerials, think drones. The goal is to optimize the communication strategies between these devices. And so they're training algorithms and they're working back and forth on that. The question is, how can these technologies interact in a sort of an experimental validation backed by research grant around intelligent, trustworthy, autonomous systems? So can these systems interact with each other for like emergency preparedness or emergency response situations? Can they be built in a way that are trustworthy in terms of making choices? To me, that's a kind of the interaction of empowering students at a level of technology and principled ethical consideration. It's kind of, testing whether or not these decision makings can be explained and held accountable. And it's that kind of an experience in the teaching and the building of the curriculum that I think you can see from schools like St. Ben's and St. John's.
Do you see accreditation or even the way we give degree granting process changing as a result of AI and the ubiquitousness of information out there?
Yeah, I think there are challenges and barriers to adapting in this space. On a couple of fronts, financially, I think faculty development, technology investment requires resources, and some of these tools are pretty expensive. So how do we balance the use of them and the cost? From a curricular point of view, higher ed is cautious with change. And as I've mentioned, there's varying levels of acceptance from skepticism to enthusiasm. From a regulatory perspective and accrediting standards, I think they're still catching up with AI-driven models. And so I think we're testing, the accrediting bodies will be I think, be tested in the coming months and years on how they value this technology in the educational enterprise, and how are schools documenting with integrity the assumed practices and the criteria of accrediting bodies, and how do the accrediting criteria consider a disruptive environment and how we teach and what we teach, and how does this work get validated in the accrediting body, and the infrastructure and the systems. St. Ben St. John's is beginning its 10-year accreditation process with HLC. So we're going to be examining our own practices and our own policies against the current criteria. And I think one of the angles, JP, will be how do we take digital literacy that has existed for some time, and how do we evolve that to account for and allow for an embracing of AI in a way. Again, HLC and accrediting bodies such as that, they're looking for integrity in your practices and accountability and assessment. And so all of these questions that have confronted higher education around accreditation will be repeated in fantastic fashion as we think about how AI will be contemplated in the space of accreditation.
Now, when we think about K-12 in particular, imagine how much information has been coming towards a millennial and through the internet. Take that times 1,000 now. How do you think this is going to impact our kids before they even come to college, and what potentially needs to happen?
Well, I think it's already happening, whether we like it or not. One thing we have to remember, that there's some intergenerational challenges here with technology, and we've seen it already. So the digital natives, so the AI native youth, I think the challenges there are enormous. And I would start by looking at K-12, but looking at parents, and really challenging our family structures and parenting approaches and our educational systems to please ask the questions about how our kids are using AI, and how are we encouraging them to think in school and out of school, and are we giving parents and families tools. One of the things that I believe strongly in, JP, is this idea of a relationship-rich, humanizing experience. So every time we're confronted interpersonally with more technology and more screens and now AI, I think our moral responsibility as administrators, as educators, as parents, as teachers, is to really invest significantly today in how we hold our space and our time with kids. And oftentimes, some of the research on interpersonal communication technology and screen time, the evidence is now compounding. And one of the big concerns I have is how parents and teachers, how are they modeling healthy interpersonal relationships with regard to technology? How distracted are parents and teachers with the technology, given the kids and the students sitting right in front of them? So really pragmatic things like when you're at the dinner table, screens down. Let's really engage on a much more humanistic way, face to face, looking people in the eye and really listening and empathizing with who they are as people, and try and emphasize that in all that we're doing educationally. But I think we have a lot to sort out, JP, around how we tend to the power of the interpersonal and the relationship-rich environments that we know give such depth and meaning, especially when I think about the epidemic of loneliness and isolation that we're facing, differently experienced at different ages, but and probably different for boys and girls as we look at young kids in the K-12 system. So I think there's a lot for the social scientists among us, and the relationship experts among us, and the parents and the teachers, of how we don't try and hide from technology, but don't be overwhelmed by it either. Let's embrace it, but also let's think about it more holistically. which I know you're going to hear a lot about this from me, but which brings us back to the kind of education we offer. And it's communal, it's relationship rich, and it's making sure that we're reminding ourselves of that as we create learning environments and experiences for students.
I was talking to a leader in higher education who did a TED talk a while ago around equity. So we talked about the role of AI in equity, and it's going to touch upon so many things. As a social, background in sociology, and when we look at it, uh, the big divide always comes back to resources,
Yeah.
right? So, and part of that is, yes, if you have parents who are more educated, if they have more finances, you're able to make more mistakes
Mhm.
versus one who doesn't have, who's not as well endowed, I would say. And so
Mhm.
some of the concerns that comes out on my podcast, and one reason I do this because I learned so much, is deciphering information for young folks. Mental health, how is it going to impact? Because kids see things in TikTok and they take it as fact. And
Mhm.
those who are older obviously were able to know what's not a peer review. I mean, you can't expect that from most people. Um, Wisdom. I mean, you can't expedite wisdom. I mean, you could probably learn all of this by fifth grade, but do you have
Yeah.
the capacity? And I think comes down to lifelong learning. I mean, the prerequisite of lifelong learning is also loving to learn. I mean, if our kids don't end up enjoying learning, well, guess what? They think I got a degree now, I go to work. You and I know that those days are almost over now. You have to constantly learn if you want to remain ahead. So there's a lot that's going to get unpacked with all this AI disruption. And my and it comes down to this particular question of social unrest in the next 5 to 10 years, which is in San Francisco, I see more cars that are being autonomous than driven by humans today.
Mm.
And as you know, that is the top three jobs in the country are driving jobs. Whether you're talking about FedEx or you're talking about a bus driver or what have you. Those jobs are probably going to get replaced, not all of them, but a lot of them. And guess what? When I talk to my daughter, she prefers to go in fully autonomous. Customer service jobs are getting replaced today. Some of the outbound sales jobs are getting replaced today. We are a service economy, cashier jobs, retail jobs. So the question is not, are we going to create more jobs? Yes, we will. But do we have enough run rate to
Mm.
create enough jobs for our graduates? As you know, as good as the economy is, the graduate market is terrible coming out trying to find jobs. So, are you worried about any sort of social unrest and our ability to find jobs for these graduates and people in general?
Yeah, I would say St. Ben St. John's has a great track record for placing graduates early and in their field of study or in graduate school. So I suspect that we'll continue to do well with that, but we're going to be challenged with how we do it. And your point about education, I'd just add we have to find a way to make sure that particularly K-12, but also in post high school education, whatever that context is, that we're also making learning joyful
Mm-hmm.
and
Exactly.
teaching not for the job. The job is a part of it, but I think we have to expand the understanding of what it means, and because we're really educating students for jobs that don't exist right now.
Exactly.
I've heard some recent news stories about the 15-year promise that big tech was making for coders, and now how much of the coding work is being
Mhm.
done through AI, right? So I think we have to be careful about what we're promising and what we're putting out there for society to consider. which again is why we're trying to really, we think that what we offer is becoming increasingly more valuable because of the very things you're saying. Critical thinking skills, reflective judgment, good communication skills, the ability to work in groups, these kinds of liberal arts outcomes, they can endure and they transcend time. And I would argue that the kind of disruption that we're facing and even the social unrest that we could point to, those wicked problems of the day, they don't need more credentialing. They need the kinds of liberal arts outcomes that we're trying to produce. And I think asking the questions about how are we thinking about the interface of education and industry, for-profit, not-for-profit, and all the different sectors, let's have some more conversations about how we do this together, because most of the CEOs I talk to in this region and in the parts of circles I run, they are not just chasing their bottom line. They also want their employees to live in communities that are healthy, where there's human flourishing available, that they can attract employees to this space, whether they're in person or digital, remote employees. They want to create spaces and communities that are flourishing. And I think that's a challenge for the future, is how do we think in more connected, relationship-based ways in a society that at times is privileging the fragmented and the individual chase for a bottom line. And those are questions of ethics and morality and the human condition. And I don't know, maybe part of our job is to teach all that to AI and make sure that we're feeding AI the kinds of insight that really does help us consider this in a more ethical and empowered, principled way.
So last question, what will St. Ben and St. John look like 5 years from now?
Well, I think there'll be some parts of us that are very familiar. I think we'll always be two places that are committed to what we call stabilitas, a sense of place. But that sense of place has to continue to see itself and to present itself to the world that's constantly changing. And so I think we'll be a physical space that represents these values. And if I had to sort of pick, the favorite thing that I would imagine different in 5 years, is that we would have created space for students, faculty, alums, employers, and those that want to collaborate with us on projects at what I would describe as the intersection of ethics, liberal arts, and technology. Kind of a hub where students practice every day leading with character in what we know will be an AI-rich environment. Whatever becomes of it, I don't know. But whatever that iteration looks like, we want this to be places where we're known for being in the world as we understand it, but in a way that is principled, consistent with our values, and privileges sort of the human experience and the dignity of people and the greater sense of what's possible in community. And so I would also say there's, this is overwhelming for some folks, and it's foreign in terms of knowing what AI is. But I would say there's no need to panic. We're approaching this with some urgency, a heavy dose of curiosity, and a deep, deep belief in that the timelessness of our values and our principles with how we teach and how we build community. So we don't want to keep up with AI, but we want to produce leaders that are principled and ethical who can shape how AI is used in the world. And it's that sense of purpose that I think when you're faced with this kind of disruption, it's sometimes for some people, it's hard to find hope. What's my place in all this? And I think part of our job as higher education professionals is to give hope and to show how community members, wherever they are in their station of education, that learning, being open to the discovery of truth and wisdom, understanding what the challenges are in the world, understanding that in the context of your own sense of purpose and a philosophy of life and education. These are not it's a false dichotomous choice to choose between a good paying job and the good life and the common good. We can do these things together. And I think that kind of belief about the future, that we can improve and we can avoid the kind of social unrest that will occur if we're not tending to the collective. And in order to do that, we have to rise above ourselves and think in more collective ways about the longer view of what it means to have a society that is healthy, civil, respectful, and flourishing. We have to think of it in broader terms. And that, when you get into that with faculty, students, and staff, it's empowering, it's inspiring, and we can feel that momentum in our ecosystem. And however daunting it is, we also have to keep giving hope and keep showing, modeling by word and example, how we can do this and what together, doing it together looks like. And that's what St. Ben and St. John's is focused on these days.
President Bruess, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
JP, it's been my privilege. Good to be with you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the College Admission TV Presidential Podcast. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll bring you another insightful conversation with a distinguished leader in higher education.